Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. Most of it's going to be taken up with this opinion piece that I found in the New York Times. Very interesting piece. And we'll get into who wrote it and the specifics, but it's about the Democratic Party and this wokeness, if you will. And the author of this is essentially making the case that this wokeness that we're seeing in the Democratic Party is kryptonite. In other words, like death to Superman. It's death to their party. And he makes some very interesting points, and we'll get to them in just a moment. And then I want to put on your radar screen this guy, and we'll get into the details in a moment as well. But the ATF pick, the pick Biden has to be the director of the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, is a total disaster if he gets there. And I'll be surprised if he doesn't get there, because this guy is a piece of work, to say the least. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of his Senate hearings and some of the questions and answers he gave there. But before we go any further, I always have to talk about our sponsors. To find our sponsors, look above the show, the video, no matter when or where you're watching it, and you will see links to our sponsors. Number one on that list is BDU, which stands for Big Daddy Unlimited. They are your Second Amendment headquarters, because not only can you get factory direct pricing delivered directly to your door on guns and ammunition, but over 100,000 related items, including tactical gear, survival gear, protective wear. If it has anything to do with the Second Amendment, you can find it at Big Daddy Unlimited. So check them out as always. And they're your Second Amendment headquarters because they defend your Second Amendment rights on a daily basis. PatriotThreads.org, apparel with a purpose. Remember the promo code, the initials to our show, JMT, John Martin Talks, JMT, for 20% off. What PatriotThreads.org is all about is they are a total fulfillment center. They will help you with charity events by producing high-quality, beautiful sportswear that has a patriotic theme to it. Like, for instance, if you're having a fishing tournament, then you want to have a shirt that represents what you're doing and proceeds going to charity of your choice. PatriotThreads.org can cover you, as the old salty dog says, from stem to stern on that. JMT, 20% off. Recoil TV. We're partnered with Recoil TV. They're all about the Second Amendment. They produce high-quality videos about the latest guns, ammunition, tactical gear, all the kind of things that Big Daddy Unlimited sells. You can find videos on that on Recoil TV. We have a channel within the channel there. So they have their own YouTube channel. Of course, we have ours as well. Spell it all the way out. John Martin Talks. We appreciate people watching live on there. Good morning. Howdy, how are you YouTubers out there? Glad to have you on YouTube and Facebook Live right now. Appreciate it. But we need more subscribers on our YouTube channel and more views, so I'd appreciate that. But our show is archived on a daily basis on the YouTube channel of Recoil TV. So check that out. We're very grateful and privileged to be a part of that. All right, we're going to get into this opinion piece from the New York Times. Is wokeness kryptonite for Democrats? This is written by Thomas B. Edsall. I don't know the gentleman, but Mr. Edsall contributes a weekly column from Washington, D.C. on politics, demographics, and inequality. Now, this piece is very, very long. I'm going to go pretty in depth in it, but I can't cover every aspect of it. I would encourage you to read it yourself, because he brings up some very interesting points here of how the Democratic Party got to the far left that it is right now. And when I'm talking about the Democrats, and I believe he's talking about, well, maybe not. This is where we probably disagree right off the bat. I'm not talking about the rank and file Democrats, because he makes a case that there are moderates in elected officials in Congress. I don't think there are any moderates left in the Democratic Party. There may be moderate voters, and they may be thinking that they voted for a moderate president, for instance, in Joe Biden, but Joe Biden, by his own words, is the most progressive president in the history of the country. So yes, there are moderate Democrats within the rank and file, but I have yet to see, especially on a national level, any moderate Democrats elected. So right off the bat, I would probably disagree with Mr. Edsel, but I think he made some great points here. As Republicans well know, Democrats are divided on a host of volatile racial, cultural, and sexual issues. And once again, I agree up to a point. The Democratic voters, I believe that they probably have mixed feelings about this, but the leadership, the leadership is all about progressive leftivism. That's it. That's who controls the Democratic Party. The modern Democratic Party is totally in control of the progressive left. And my only political goal, I've been telling you this for a while. If you're new to the show, you need to hear this. My only political goal is to stop the progressive takeover of this country. I'm not saying that progressives are only in the Democratic Party. We certainly have some in the Republican Party and obviously independents and all that. But the Democratic Party is controlled by progressive leftists. I don't see how you could argue that. And so I agree that there are moderate Democrats in the rank and file voters, but the leaders, not so much, not any really. Tell me where they are. Take a look at the polls, Mr. Edsel says. In 2019, the Democracy Fund Voter Study Group commissioned a survey asking for agreement or disagreement with the statement, there are only two genders, male and female. Well, before we get into the results of that poll, let me just say for a fact, because I'm going to do this a couple times during this conversation. There are only two genders. That is not my opinion. That is simple scientific fact. Now, am I saying that people can't claim to be whatever? Are there people who are, in the wrong body? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. They think there are. Are there people who are predispositioned to be homosexual, for instance? I think the evidence is pretty clear that there are people like that. I kind of joke with my wife. I'll say, well, such and such is gay, aren't they? And she says, well, I'm not sure if they are or not. And I'll always say, well, if they're not, they missed a good chance at it. I can tell you that. There are people, I believe, that are lean towards being gay no matter what. They may have been born that way. I'm not disputing that. But as far as the actual sex of a person, now there are, morphodites, some of that stuff. I'm not even talking about that. But in general, there are only two sexes. Now, how confused a person can be about that and all of that is certainly up for debate and everything else. And I'm not trying to bash people who make different sexual choices. As I've told you before, but if I say it, hadn't said it in a while, but if I say it, it bears repeating. If you're new to the show, it may shock you. But I have a very simple policy personally when it comes to that. I'm very open-minded, but closed-minded. So I don't really care what you do. But the science says, that's why I say it's not my opinion. It is just fact. The science would tell you that there are only two genders, male and female. What you do after that is human decision. In the full sample, this is back to this poll. Let's get back to this question so you understand if you're just tuning in. This 2019 Democracy Voter Study asked the question, there are only two genders, male or female, and they ask in this poll, do you agree or disagree? In the full sample, which means everybody, including Democrats, Independents, Republicans, whatever, in the full sample, a decisive majority, 59%, almost 60%, including 43% who strongly agreed. So, in other words, the vast majority of the country strongly agreed that there are only two sexes. 32% disagreed, and 9% who said they weren't sure. So I don't know what it would take to make them figure that out. Among Republicans, it was no contest, which is probably not surprising. 78% agreed that there are only two sexes, and 16% disagreed. Independents mirrored the sample as a whole. Now, I would first ask, if you're a Republican, conservative, what 16% believe there are more than two sexes? I just don't see how you can believe that based on science. And I'm just basing this on science. But Democrats, the writer here, Mr. Edsel, points out something very interesting. Democrats, let me back up so we understand this. In the full sample of everybody, 59% agreed that there are only two sexes. But in the Democrats, were split a plurality. 48% disagreed and 44% agreed. So almost half of the Democrats said that they disagreed that there are only two sexes. Well, you can see why we're light years apart on that particular issue. And here's the part where I don't understand it. And I want to do a little experiment here. I got to reach into my pocket here and get something out. Because I would maintain to you that what you believe doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. Because, for instance, how about take gravity? Does it really matter what your opinion of gravity is? I mean, you could say, I don't believe in gravity, or you could say, I'm not sure, or you could say, that I do believe in gravity. But let me just show you an example, and I hope it doesn't mess up my sound here. These are my car keys, my house keys, right? So if I drop them right here, what's going to happen? Are they just going to mysteriously float across the room? What if I say, for instance, I absolutely do not believe in gravity? It doesn't matter what you believe in certain things. There are only two sexes. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant what you believe. It's not my opinion. It is simply a fact. Once again, gravity. Does it really matter what I believe? It's reality. And we have to deal with reality as it is. And sometimes the Democratic Party certainly seems to have a hard time with reality. The survey itself arguably embodied what critics might call transphobic framing. I have no idea what that means. Transgender issues are among the most polarizing, I would agree with that, in contemporary politics, and much contemporary cultural conflict, in fact, stems from framing disputes. But he says that transgender issues are among the most polarizing. And I agree that they are, but we would probably disagree on why. Like, for instance, me, I told you what my policy was. I don't really care. I don't have a big issue with people who are transgender. If you want to either be, dressed like a woman, if you want to cut body parts off or add body parts on, hey, as long as it's not children, then I'm fine. I got a big issue when they start pushing it on kids. Adults, as long, the way I look at basic rights, and this is very basic, it's something my dad said a long time ago, that in America, you have the right to swing your arm any way you want it until you start hitting me. And then it is encroaching upon my rights. So what you want to do at the simplest level is up to you. But where I think the controversy, now I realize there are a lot of people based on all kind of different beliefs, certainly Christian beliefs and things like that, that may have personally a very huge problem with homosexuality. And that's a topic really for another day. What I'm saying is that I believe that, and that the vast majority of conflict comes between when people, regardless, and in this case we're talking about transgender, but I don't think it necessarily matters, when you try to push your rights or your beliefs on me to the point that it interferes with my rights, that's where the conflict comes in. Like I say, I don't believe that the vast majority of Americans even think about transgender issues on a daily basis. But if you're saying that a biological man who is still a biological man can compete in women's sports, for instance, or go into a woman's bathroom, I think that's where you have the big conflict. So it's not so much a personal choice that someone makes that's the conflict. It is the choice to try to push your belief system onto me and others. That's where I think the big conflict comes, not in the personal choices people make, even though I may or may not agree with them. And September 27, Pew, that's a whole nother thing, P, the PP dossier, we know that was all fake, right? But let me regroup. An September 2017 Pew Research survey asked respondents to choose between two statements. Whether a person is a man or a woman is determined at birth, and whether a person is a man or a woman can be different from the sex at birth. Well, once again, my opinion, your opinion, in my opinion, our opinion doesn't matter. It is scientific fact. You can't get beyond the science. Now, I'm not saying, as I said before, that people might not be predetermined. And a man and woman can choose a different sex. They do it, obviously. So my opinion there doesn't matter either, because people are obviously choosing to be different sexes. So the debate about whether or not they can do it is pretty much over, right? Now, whether they should do it is a whole nother topic, but whether they can do it, they are doing it. But the idea that science somehow backs up that choice is just not factual. I don't see someone chime in on, I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm 100% right all the time. I think I am on this, but chime in on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching the show and let me know what you see, because I'm just trying to be very specific. I'm talking about the pure science. You can even take God out of the equation like the Democrats want to and just say, based purely on science, there's only two genders. It's just the way it is. A 54%, back to this question, so I get on these, Billy Bob here, he's my psychic sidekick. If you hadn't met Billy Bob Bass, he has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. He keeps me straight here on the show, and I do ramble from time to time. So let's get back to this question. So the question is whether a person is a man or a woman is determined at birth, and the secondary is whether a person is a man or a woman can be different from the sex at birth. 54% majority of all those surveyed, so the whole population, said sex is determined at birth. Pretty firm that over half the Americans feel that way. And 44% said it can be different from the sex at birth. That's an opinion. I don't understand that. And let me just ask this. I'm asking, as they say, for a friend. Are human beings the only animals that are affected like this? Now, I know, for instance, there are animals that actually do change sexes. Believe it or not, fish do that. Fish absolutely can be born one sex, and depending on, as far as the research I'm familiar with, depending on populations of fish, they can literally change sex. Not all of them, but grouper do. For instance, gag grouper can change sex during their lifetime. But as far as I know, no mammals can. I don't know of any mammals that could do that. Once again, I could be wrong. So if, assuming I'm right, that no mammals can actually change sex, then why are human beings unique in this? I think it has to do with their freedom of choice, their intellectual ability that gets them confused, because I don't see in the animal world, and at the end of the day, as divinely inspired as we're supposed to be, we're still biologically, we're animals. We're really no different, and I know some people will freak out when I say this, we're no different than apes or buffalo for that, from a biological standpoint. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, our mental capacity, our sentiency, that we realize who and what we are, absolutely. I'm not even getting there, but from a purely biological conversation, there's really no difference in us than any other species of mammal out there. In that sense, we are born male or female. What we do after that, I don't know. I've seen some pretty queer cows in my day, though, I have to say that. But Republican voters and those who lean Republican chose at birth. In other words, your sex is determined at birth. Let's see the general population number again, 54%. But Republicans, 80-19. Democratic voters and those who lean Democrat said sex can be different from the sex at birth, 64-34. And my only question would be, based on what? I mean, you constantly hear from the Democrats and their minions in the media without evidence. What is the evidence? Show me the scientific evidence, not your opinion, but the scientific evidence that people are born differently than what nature created them to be. I have not seen any actual scientific research that shows that. I've seen opinionated research, but that's a different story. Or on with the article, it says, or take the public's view of the defund the police movement that gained momentum after the murder of George Floyd a year ago. This is very interesting. And it begins to show what I think is the real problem politically in America right now. A March 1st through 2nd U.S. Today IPOSIS poll found that voters were opposed to defunding the police 58 to 18. 58 to 18, with the strongest opposition in general, they're talking about, with the strongest opposition among whites, 67% to 13% support. The rest undecided. Republicans, 84 to 4, that were opposed to defunding the police, while a plurality of Democrats were opposed at 39 to 34, almost a tie, which was also true among African Americans, 37 to 28. So let's get straight on this defund the police. When you're talking about defund the police, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from someone in a minute that just spells this out pretty clearly. You're talking about no police, all right? It's not like you're going to have voluntary police officers, right? So if you don't pay, and by no means am I saying police officers do it only for the money, because that's obviously not true. Most of them do it for a sense of public service. Some of them, quite a few, especially in places like these big cities, are legacy. Their family, it's just passed down from generation. But if you defund the police, that means no police. There will be no police. Now, to me, there's only a handful of reasons you could possibly believe that defunding the police would be right. First of all, this tendency for these progressives to believe in some sort of nirvana. They take the human equation out, and if they just defund the police, we will all be kumbaya, right? We'll all be peace, love, and harmony. Well, that is not practical. It doesn't work. It's never worked. And I don't think, in my opinion, it ever is going to work. And then there's lunacy. They're just bat whatever crazy. They just thinking, outside the box so much that they're under the water, so to speak. They're just crazy. But there is a third option that rarely, if ever, gets discussed. And that option is that they actually, and these are my words, want to destroy the country. They want to. Black Lives Matter, for instance. Look at this picture. This is a picture. That man in the middle is Nicolas Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela. The ladies are part of Black Lives Matter. The lady in the black dress there is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. She's the one, I think, that's doing all this house flipping and everything else. Make no mistake about it. The Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not talking about everybody who has a t-shirt or holds a sign, but the Black Lives Matter movement is founded on Marxism, on communism, plain and simple. They want to destroy the U.S. Constitution, thus destroying America, because they want a communist regime. They have clearly stated this. They've revamped their website, but when they first came on the scene, it was real clear. Now it's a little murkier because they're, getting politically correct, so to speak. But make no mistake about it, Black Lives Matter, the organization, is a communist organization, which, on a side note, shows you how stupid we are for flying Black Lives Matter flags on embassies around the world. Basically, we're saying that the beacon of freedom is now a communist country, and we are definitely moving in that direction. But I want to play you, if you think I'm overstating this case, I'm going to play you this video. This was from last year when a Black Lives Matter, not just an activist, but a person that was running part of the organization in Chicago, actually said this about looting and pillaging. Check it out.
I don't care if somebody decides to loot a Gucci or a Macy's or a Nike, because that makes sure that that person eats. That makes sure that that person has clothes. That's reparations. That is reparations. Anything they want to take it, because these businesses have insurance. They're going to get their money back. My people aren't getting anything.
Wow. Think about that. She is justifying looting people's stores. In some cases around the country, they've been African-American store owners burned to the ground, right? But to me, color of that doesn't really matter. But you can loot a store because of some sense of oppression there. Well, that goes contrary to everything about the rule of law in the United States of America. What she just said is totally opposite the founding of this nation. Now, you could argue, as she is doing, that she is justified. But you can't argue that and still say that we're going to be the United States of America. Because if she is right, and I am wrong, then the United States of America is over. It's over. The experiment is us. That's why I talk about battling ignorance and apathy, about this experiment we call the United States of America. Because if she's right, it's over. Maybe that's that you could argue whether that's a good thing or not, but I don't see how you could argue that you could believe what she says and believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. They're diametrically opposed. A Harvard-Harris survey in February, back to this article, asks, do you think there is a growing cancel culture that is a threat to our freedom or not? By 64 to 36, a majority of voters, so when all put into a basket, so to speak, 64% to 36 majority of voters said they thought there was. So a good majority of Americans believe that cancel culture is a threat, and it's real. I can't believe how the 36% don't, but anyway. And Republicans see a threat by 80 to 20. Independents by 64 to 30, basically the same as the voters as a whole. But Democrats were split with a slight majority, 52 to 48, saying they don't see a threat. So, but still, 52% of Democratic voters believe that cancel culture is a threat. And so they ask you, growing cancel culture that is a threat to our freedom or not? It is. It is. That's my tag on there. It is a threat to our freedom. There's no question about it. Freedom of speech, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the First Amendment. Now, I personally believe that the Second Amendment is the one that basically protects all the others. But without freedom of speech, what do we have? We got nothing. Nothing at all. I mean, once again, if cancel culture is right, then America is wrong, because the Constitution absolutely grants us freedom of speech, or protects us. I shouldn't say grants us, because that's not, and we'll get into that in a minute, protects our right to freedom of speech. Although centrist Democrats make up a majority of the party in the polls I cited above, this is what the writer's saying, and he's probably right about that. The majority of Democrats, I think, are patriotic Americans. I think they're just locked into this mentality that they have to vote Democrat. I can relate to that. I kind of grew up with that. I broke that away myself. But then again, the first president I ever had the opportunity to vote for and voted for was Ronald Reagan. So maybe I was always on that side. But the fact that a substantial minority of Democrats takes more extreme stance allows Republicans to portray the Democratic Party as very much in thrall to its more radical wing. And I agree with that point up to a point. I think the reason why, he makes the point that Republicans can attack Democrats as a whole, even though they might not majority even agree with some of the more radical things of the party. The problem is that is who is running the party. There are no moderate Democratic leaders. I'm going to play you two quick videos that go back to the 2020 Democratic presidential debate. And, there was like 20 candidates, so they divided it up over a couple different nights at this point. But the 10, I think, or so people that are in both of these videos, I think represent, without a doubt, including the two in the White House now, represent the belief of the Democratic Party as a whole. I firmly believe that. And I think these two prove conclusive that there are no moderates in the Democratic elected leadership, period. Let's play the first one.
The stage last night on the topic of decriminalization of the border. If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation. Can we keep the hands up so we could see them?
Let's remember, that's not just a theoretical exercise.
That was everybody except the one person, I think the guy from, I want to say Colorado, which he never had a chance anyway. But open border. So keep in mind that the majority of Democrats running for president, including the ones that are in the White House now, God help us, were for a totally open border. Because if you decriminalize, so we got to get these words, if you don't make it illegal to come into our country illegally, if there is no such thing, then it's an open border. I don't see how you could debate that. You could debate whether we should have an open border, but if you take away the penalties for crossing into our country illegally, then by every measure, we have an open border, which is exactly what we have now. So they made promises kept. We have the border they campaigned on. And then I want to play this next video. It's very similar. It's the same group of people at a presidential debate, and they ask about people coming here illegally and whether they're entitled to something that even American citizens don't get. Check it out.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
Woohoo! And you hear the people cheering for it, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, those are two important clips because you have the leaders of the Democratic Party. And remember, Biden said in one of the debates with Trump, I am the Democratic Party. And I take these progressives at their word. So the Democratic Party believes in an open border and a welfare state to people coming. So don't punish people. Don't stop them from coming here illegally. And on top of that, if just being able to come to the land of the free and the home of the brave wasn't enough, we going to give you some ice cream as well. We're going to give you something we don't even give U.S. citizens, and that is free medical care unless they serve in the military, right? The past 12 months have seen a centrist, this is back to the writer's point here. The past 12 months have seen a centrist counter-mobilization designed to strengthen a mainstream image of the Democratic Party and to block power of the more radical left to set policy. So he's saying that there is a movement within the Democratic Party to try to wrest control of the party from these hardcore progressive leftists. I hope he's right. I hope he is. I don't see any evidence of that, but I'm not, in the internal workings. But he says, he lists some groups. New groups and digital publications include Persuasion, Counterweight, American Purpose, Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and the Academic Freedom Alliance. Well, let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I am about as in tune as you can probably get. I'm a political junkie, if you hadn't figured that out. I kind of grew up in it. I am what, as Popeye says, I is what I is. I am what I am, right? But I've never heard of any of these people, any of these groups. Not one of them have I heard of. Now, that doesn't make them less significant, but they're certainly not in the mainstream. All we've really heard is Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, we've heard that, and this is the culture. Look at the sign. Take these progressives at their word. So I've seen the smoke, and I've felt the heat, and I've seen the fires. So, but some of these moderate groups, I not so much. And then, of course, Antifa. The two groups we hear the most from are Black Lives Matter and Antifa, the armed wing, literally, of the Democratic Party. And yeah, I know all about them. We've seen them. We hear them. Even CNN covers them from time to time. But these other groups, I wish them well. I hope they're successful because I'm not trying to destroy the Democratic Party. I'm trying to stop the progressive takeover of this country. The Democratic Party is destroying itself, which is really what this author is actually saying. I'm not even advocating that you leave the Democratic Party. That's your choice. But I hope if you stay in the Democratic Party and you are a moderate and you care about the U.S. Constitution, that you will have the courage to take that party back. Because we need a good two-party system. Listen, but now we're going to get into some of the thought of these progressives, and it's pretty frightening, but to me, not surprising. And I don't know these people. I'm just going by this New York Times article. Nadine Strossen, professor emerita at New York Law School and former president of the American Civil Liberties Union, that's no small thing, wrote by email that she considers herself a Now, this is a person, let me back up. This first person is actually pushing back on the progressives. I want to say that first. Listen to what she said. She considers herself a bleeding heart liberal, but even more important to me, she says, are the classic liberal values that are under siege from all sections of the political spectrum. Now, this is a person who identifies as a bleeding heart liberal, not a progressive, but a bleeding heart liberal. Listen to what she says are under attack by the Democratic Party. Left to right, but she actually says Republicans too. Left to right, including freedom of speech, thought and association, academic freedom, due process, and personal privacy. Wow. I mean, this lady, where, I hate to say it, man, but you know where you're going to end up, right? If you truly are a moderate, where people that take the middle of the road, the only thing you find in the middle of the road is dead skunks and possums, at least in my neck of the woods. So that's where you're heading, ma'am. I'm with you. We need classic liberalism is not a bad thing. We need a yin and a yang. We need to have debate. I'm all for honest debate. These progressives, you can't debate with them. I've told you one of my axioms is when it comes to these progressives, you can't reason with them. You can't deal with them. You can't negotiate with them. You can only defeat them at the ballot box. And some Democrats apparently are beginning to see that. But the only thing, she's going to end up with them dead skunks in the middle of the road. There are, of course, back to the writer here, there are, of course, plenty of people who sharply defend the progressive wing of the Democratic coalition. And this, ladies and gentlemen, these next few examples are going to show us where we stand here, ladies. And I'm going to identify what the real problem is. Elizabeth Rose, a law student, argued, for example, in defense of cancel culture last year that for all the condemnations on cancel culture as un-American, speech-suppressing monster, I would argue that cancel culture is incredibly American. Incredibly American. So this is what we're up against. She's saying that cancel culture, which basically is the death of free speech, is incredibly American. I don't see how you come to that conclusion, and I'll expand upon that in a minute. She went on to say that cancel culture is essentially a boycott. Well, a boycott to me is, I'm not opposed to boycotts if that's what you want to do. You have the right to do that. But here's the thing I've never understood. If you don't like what I have to say, why can't you just change the channel? I don't understand trolling, for instance. I know that what they're trying to do, it's not really honest. But if you're honest, then why would you watch an hour of me every day if you don't agree with anything I say just to bash me? That kind of thing, which is fine. I don't mind anybody watching. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything I say by any stretch. But if you hate what I'm doing, why would you watch it? Why wouldn't you just change the channel? So that's something I've never understood about the progressive movement. Why can't you just change the channel, so to speak? And she goes on to say, it's refusing to participate or support those that promote racist, the cancel culture she's talking about, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, or otherwise ignorant behavior. So I'd ask her, what would you say to claiming there is more than one gender? Isn't that ignorant behavior? Because there's no science that proves that. There's no science whatsoever that proves that there is more than one gender. I'm willing to hear it. Let me know. And as far as defunding the police, I think we could probably all agree that if you defund the police, there are no police. So how does that in the real world make a better place? I don't see how it's possible. And it goes on to say, protest is at the heart. This is this lady saying about the cancel culture. Protest is at the heart of this country. I would agree with that. And shouldn't be limited in the name of making already powerful people feel safer to spew, I guess that's what I'm doing, ideas that are not tolerant in today's society, which that is definitely not what I'm doing. I'm spewing ideas, but I'm a very tolerant person, and it's the left that's not tolerant. But let me just tell you about free speech. Free speech doesn't mean agreeable speech. If it's only speech that you agree with, and that's the only thing people can say, that's not free speech. At its core, free speech means that you have to hear some pretty vile stuff. You have to allow people to say things that you're not only don't agree with, but that offend you. It's okay to be offended. The Constitution doesn't say, thou shalt not be offended. Now show me the non-offensive clause in the Constitution. So agreeable speech is not part of free speech. It can be in the sense that it's okay to hang around the echo chamber if that's what you want. But one of the most liberal professors I ever had, God rest his soul, Robert Premack, said that if you want to consider yourself an intelligent person, he was extremely liberal, he said you have to be willing to listen to the ideas of people who are 180 degrees different from you, the best people. And that's the only way. But I want to play kind of an icon of the left who's been in the news a lot lately. This is from last year. This is Chris Cuomo of CNN fame talking about and exposing his complete ignorance, really his stupidity about free speech. Check it out.
Too many see the protests as the problem. No, The problem is what forced your fellow citizens to take to the streets: persistent and poisonous inequities and injustice. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I'll show you where. It's called the First Amendment. I hate to say it, but that guy is a moron, man. Maybe you lay off the roid juice or whatever. I want to make a quick announcement in this. I've kind of looked at my notes. I think this subject is very important. So we only got a few minutes left. I'm not going to get into the ATF story, but check out the person that there's a Breitbart article on it. Check out the person that Biden's put forward. If you believe in the Second Amendment, we got to find a way to stop this guy because he would be a disaster. We might talk about him maybe tomorrow or whatever. But I want to keep going on this subject because exposure, back to this opinion piece, and as I say, this is a very long article. I'm only covering about half of it, so I would encourage you to read it. It's pretty interesting because exposure by millions is so easy now with social media, celebrities rich and powerful, connected, and beautiful. This is what this person is saying. Can no longer get away with disrespecting human dignity. They are not being held to a higher standard, talking about conservatives, for being a public figure. They are being held to a bare minimum. So I asked the age-old question I've been asking for a while. What standard is the left held to? Because I can't find one. There's no double standard. There's a standard for people like me that we can be held to. But I can't find a standard that the left is held to whatsoever. I can't find it, man. This next paragraph, man, it shows the root of the problem. I told you, I promised you I would get to the root of it, and this is it right here. The New Republic essay in 2019, The Strange Liberal Backlash to Woke Culture by Royu Spaeth, makes an interesting argument that, according to the writer, that aligns with Rose's, the one we just read. Listen to this. The foot-stamping insistence on individual rights obliterates what should be a tension between those rights and the well-being of the community as a whole. So the individual's rights, and I've been telling you this for a long time, but this is a Democrat, progressive saying it, they don't care about the rights of the individual. It's groupthink, period. This is all, back to this point this person is making, this is all the more relevant at a time when the political implications of unbridled individualism, so if you're individual, represented by capitalism, self-made man, have never been clearer. So what's never been clearer, sir, or ma'am, I don't even know by that name, but they are, not trying to be funny in this particular case, although it's okay to be. It's communism, period. What he's talking about is communism. So I got a question, and you may not like this question, but have we outgrown freedom? Have we outgrown, is freedom, because you think about it, our republic is still relatively in its infancy when you look at world history. Maybe democracy, Republican, and I'm not talking about republic voters, I'm talking about the republic, like Ben Franklin said, a republic, if you can keep it. Maybe it's impossible once you get to a certain size. Maybe it's not possible once you get into the modern world. I don't want to believe that, but I'm asking a question. Have we outgrown freedom? Is it something? Because let me just tell you, freedom requires personal responsibility. Groupthink does not work in a republic. Does not work in a republic. If you're not concerned about the individual, if you don't take personal individual responsibility as a citizen of this republic, I think that's what Benjamin Franklin was alluding to, then we are doomed. There's no other way. You cannot be, because like Thomas Jefferson said, you can't be both ignorant and free. You want what never was and never will be. So that's one of the reasons why I do the show all the time. But I ask the question, have we outgrown freedom? I'm going to play this JFK video. One of the people that I came of age, JFK was the true leader of the Democratic Party even after his death. Check it out.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I ask you right now, in all honesty, if you are a Democrat, I'm not talking about the leaders, I'm talking about rank and file Democrat. If you're part of the percentage that still believes that they're, that people are, they're one gender, whatever, all those kind of things, not defunding the police. If you believe in the Constitution, ask yourself this: is the modern current Democratic Party, the ones that are in charge, are they closer to or farther away from JFK's vision there? I think the Democratic Party that he's talking about is dead. Now, do Democratic voters still exist that could take the party back over? Yeah. Whether they can, I don't know. Or take the defensive of the call to defund police by Rashid Shah. And listen to this. A graduate student in the computer science at Princeton Center for Information Technology Policy. Shah wrote in an op-ed in January 21st, Daily Princetonian. So this is an Ivy League graduate person, best and the brightest. This is what they wrote. We should conclude that the police must be defunded because they overwhelmingly use their budget to harm people of color and to stoke white supremacist movements. With that conclusion in mind and in the service of humanity, we as Princeton students, staff, professors, administrators, and trustees can contribute to the ongoing effort to defund the police. And listen to this next part, because I tell you, take these progressives at their word. He goes on to write in this, you may be wondering what exactly people mean when they say defund the police. Yes, we mean literally abolish the police. Check my time. Take them at their word. I was going to play this Maxine Waters. We're going to skip that one, where she's talking about the role of police officers basically to keep black people in line. The conflict within the Democratic Party and among progressives gets played out on at least two levels. And we'll close the show with this. At one level, the writer is saying it's a dispute over ground rules. Can a professor quote literature or historic documents that use taboo words? What rights should be granted to a person accused of sexual harassment? Granted now. Are these issues or subjects that should not be explored in an academic setting? Granted. So they're asking, our rights are not granted, bestowed upon us by government. I'm not going to play these videos, but let me just go ahead and tell you. Remember Biden said, we the people, is the government? That's the difference right there. The difference is really, do you believe in the Constitution of the United States of America or not? I had a bunch of different things that but I want to close with this right here. This is James Carville, who you probably know, but he used to be considered a moderate. He was one of Clinton's people. James Carville said this right here, and he was asked this question by a Vox reporter. Wokeness is a problem and everyone knows it, is what he said, Carville said. It's hard to talk to anybody today, and I talk to lots of people in the Democratic Party who doesn't say this, but they want to say it out loud. And the reporter asked, why don't they say it? And he said, because they'll get clobbered. That pretty much says it all, ladies and gentlemen. The problem that we're having, the reason why we can't unify right now on anything is because we have forgotten what we basically agreed with. We don't need to shred the Constitution. We don't need to amend the Constitution. We need to reread it and teach it, because the solution is the Constitution. I would maintain that the solution to pretty much all of our problems is getting back to the fundamentals of the U.S. Constitution. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to all our social media sites, like them, share them far and wide with others. Support our sponsors, the links above the video. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Man, we need to pray for this nation, because she's in trouble and she needs that prayer and deserves it more than ever. But as I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.